Hi, everybody, and welcome to Birth Talk with Lynn and Sheila. We are here on Facebook Live, and we're going to talk about from C-section to home birth. I want to welcome my guest, Sheila Stubbs, or maybe not my guest. The two of us are just going to have a conversation. But hi, Sheila, how are you?
I'm just doing great, Lynn.
Sheila is from Canada, who finds herself living in North Carolina. Husband has a job assignment here, so she's in the States right now. She is the author of Birthing the Easy Way. You can find this on Amazon.com. It's, again, another wonderful resource for any woman who's pregnant, no matter what your birth decision is, whether you're choosing a hospital, a midwife birth, a home birth. It's just a very comforting book filled with stories. And Sheila is very witty and wonderful. And I'm very glad to be having a conversation with you today. And I just want to start off today by saying that we are not experts. We're not giving advice. We are mainly here to talk to you, pregnant women, and anybody interested in the topic about the idea that you have choices, that once a C-section, not always a C-section. The culture tells you certain things. Doctors' practices tells you certain things. And so we want to take maybe the next 45 minutes or so to just talk about this topic. So let's just see if anyone is up and running yet. Not yet. I don't see that anybody has joined us, probably because there is a delay. I'm not sure that it has kicked into Facebook yet, but we will just keep on going, and I'll keep my eyes peeled to the screen to see if you have any comments. So please drop us a comment with a question or a concern, because we can, direct this casual talk based on whatever subject or issue that you might like to talk about. So, gosh, I don't know what we should start off with first, Sheila. Maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself. I know you're a nurse. She's a mom of 6 kids, and we'd like to get into, I know that your first birth was a C-section, and your last couple of births were home births, a few of which were unassisted, just you and your husband. So that might be very scary to some women as they think about birth, like, wow, how could I have a C-section and then have a home birth? And we're going to pick apart what some of those issues are and concerns and fear that people might have, because that does sound major to once have a C-section and then to go on. So anyways, tell us a little bit about yourself and just ease on into the topic as you feel you'd like to share your story.
Okay. So my first baby was born in '83, and I took 2 sets of classes because I was going to make sure I wanted to have a natural birth. So I went to the classes that were offered at the hospital because they know everything, I thought. Mm-hmm. And then I also took an extra set of classes with International Childbirth Education Association. Well, I wasn't really prepared for the attitude, I guess, in the hospital. And ultimately, I end up saying that the reason for my cesarean was physician distress, because I was not in any distress and my baby was not in any distress. I was just laboring along fine, but my doctor said, it's taking too long and infections pick up speed and we have to get this show on the road. So ultimately what happened is a very common story across North America, where they started to intervene with, first of all, they said I had to have an epidural. And I didn't want an epidural. I was fine. In fact, I was falling asleep between contractions. So I was relaxed. But they told me that if I was too tense, then I wasn't going to labor correctly. So this epidural would relax me, and then I could have the baby naturally. And of course, the epidural just caused problems. It caused the baby's heart it caused my labor to slow down. And of course, then they add the Pitocin to the mixture. And then it ultimately the Pitocin caused fetal distress, and they had to do a C-section and save my baby's life. Well, I ended up feeling like something's very wrong. Like I was fine and everything seemed to be fine. So I couldn't quite figure out where things went wrong. And it was the book by Nancy Weiner Cohen, Silent Knife, that really opened my eyes. And I was saying, yes, this is what's wrong. It was the intervention that was the problem. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with a woman having a slow labor. The fact was, though, that my water broke, and that's what started my labor. My water broke in the middle of the night, so we went to the hospital, and my labor was just very, very slow. And the doctor said that I was at higher risk for infection because it had been so long. Of course, looking back now, I think if they had perhaps kept their hands out of me, there wouldn't be such a risk of infection. Anyway, with my next baby, I had read and educated and got in contact with people who knew more about natural birth. And I hired a midwife. Now in Canada, at that time, there was, midwives weren't legal. They weren't illegal in Ontario, but they weren't legally recognized as a profession. So really, once we went to the hospital, I had my second baby vaginally in the hospital. But once she was in the hospital with me, she could be nothing more than my doula. But she came to my home and she monitored my labor at home. And then I ended up having the second baby vaginally. And the interesting thing about that was my first baby, they said ultimately that the reason for the C-section was because my baby was just too big to fit through my pelvis. In fact, the doctor said, he said, this is how we know, this is how nature tells us that your baby won't fit in your pelvis, is that it's just going so slowly. Well, that second baby was over 2 pounds bigger than the first baby. So I knew there was nothing wrong with my pelvis, but something very wrong with the way birth is done in the hospitals. Mm-hmm. And I had the rest of my babies at home. The biggest baby was 10 pounds, 3 ounces, and it was actually a really easy birth. And I had, well, I don't know if you want to go through all, which one was born when.
No, I do want to say something. Some women have said that the 10-pound baby did not cause pain, but the 7 or 6 pound baby did. So I guess the comment I just want to make is it's not the weight of the baby that's going to cause you pain. There's many other factors going on. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And what I wanted to ask you was, they call it VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean. Did you have any fears or worries going from a C-section to a vaginal birth? Did you fear that what they tell you is you could rupture? You know, once a C-section, always a C-section. You might not be sewn up. You're weaker. It's weaker muscle because it's been tampered with. So what did you do? Did you do any research on, is the uterus weaker because you've had the C-section? You're really not put together fully.
I don't know. I can't speak for the truth of that, whether or not it's weaker. But in answer to the first question, yes, I was scared. I was very nervous about that because that's all you hear from the doctor. I actually went to speak to the obstetrician who had done my C-section. Mm-hmm. And I asked him what was wrong with my body and what would be my chances. And he said I had about a 30% chance in his calculation that I would be able to have a vaginal birth after cesarean. But I had to make sure that my baby was smaller, that I didn't go past my due date, that I had to come into the hospital at the very first sign of labor, that I couldn't be in labor more than 12 hours. I broke every one of those rules. I'm not afraid to say. And I had a bigger baby. So after he had told me that, he said I would definitely, one of the worst things too, he said that when the baby's born, he would put his hand up inside of me to check my scar.
Oh, gee.
Well, I shook that uterus exploring hand goodbye, and I never went back to him.
Good.
Although several years later, I did write him a letter and tell him that I'd had a vaginal birth and a home birth and more. And I was actually having a meeting at my house one day of VBAC women when he happened to call me to say, I got your letter. You sound like you're really upset. And I said, oh my God. Well, I was really upset. because I didn't need to have a C-section. And I've heard that he's one of the better doctors in that hospital now, and I like to think that I might have had something to do with that.
Ah, good. Very good.
However, I got through my fear because there is that risk of rupture, but the statistics are it's a very low risk. And one of the things that made me go, was the fact that when I was 19, I broke both my legs in a car accident. Now, I weigh about 150 pounds. And if I'm walking up the stairs with a scar across my knee, where the surgery, I had pretty much my kneecap is missing, most of it. Now, if doctors never told me I was going to blow out my knee going upstairs, why would they worry about my uterus blowing up just by doing what it's supposed to do? Because when you think of how many pounds per square inch is going on that scar on a knee, that seems to me like it would be a lot tougher muscle. Now, a uterus can completely heal, and it's probably healed within the first 6 weeks. I'm not a surgeon. I don't know this. And the doctors, apparently, I found out years later that when they do a repeat C-section, they quite often can't even find the original scar because they heal so well. And I decided that my body can heal just fine, thank you. So that gave me confidence. But I won't deny that, yes, I was definitely worried. I think that's pretty normal. What if I'm one of that less than 0.5% or whatever that is going to have a rupture? But I didn't.
Very good. That's a good point about the uterus, the scar being completely healed, and that they couldn't even see the previous sutures or whatever. So I want to say hi to Christina, Nicole, Susan, and Tammy. Let me read Tammy's comment. C-section with my first baby, 8 pounds, 12 ounces. Pretty much the same labor story as yours, Sheila, even down to the doctor telling her that the baby was too big. She had a VBAC in the hospital with the next baby, also with a midwife at home who came to the hospital as a doula, 9 pounds, 5 ounces. Then she had 3 home births after C-sections, and they were 10 pounds, 10 ounces, and 9 pounds. And I think her youngest was 12 pounds, and everything went well. She, from my memory, I know, hi, Tammy, I know Tammy, she did not transfer to the hospital. It was not an emergency. And I think what was important was her mom came afterwards for support, bringing meals and helping to babysit the other kids. And you know, that could be another topic we could talk about, is sometimes we don't have the support. If you've had a C-section, you might have an opinionated mom or mother-in-law or sister. You might have fear around you. Well, I had 4 C-sections and I needed them all. And wow, I never could have gone for a VBAC. And so, you know, our world is even more stressed when those women closest to us are not, we're not asking them to encourage us. We're just asking them to accept the decision that we're making for our life, you know. So
a lot of times I would find I wouldn't tell people because they would presume I was having a repeat cesarean, and they'd say, well, when are you going in? And I'd just, oh, we'll see. And another little trick I often used was the doctor says. And it wasn't a lie, because I would use the doctor said, but I would use a doctor like Dr. Marsden Wagner, or you know, Dr. Laura, Dr. Phil, I don't care what doctor. If I liked what they said, I would quote them and say, well, but the doctor said this or that. It's okay. The doctor said that it's safer to have a VBAC than a repeat cesarean. But it might not necessarily be my doctor, but one of the doctors. He said it. I'll take it.
That's right. All right. So we have a question. Okay. So Susan asks, Sheila, she asked like 2 or 3 questions. Did you have plans in case of rupture, backup plans, and did you do anything particular to prepare physically for the VBAC? So what would you have done if it would have ruptured? Did that go through your mind?
I will also admit I thought I was rupturing when I was delivering, and I believe it's because I was flat on my back with my legs up in stirrups, and that is not what I wanted, but that's what I got with my VBAC, and it hurt so bad. I thought, that's it, I'm dying, I'm going to rupture, but they'll save me.
Yeah.
No, I don't. It was a long time ago.
Okay.
But I don't think I really had a backup plan for what if I rupture, because I was delivering in a hospital and I felt that would be taken care of. I trusted that much.
All right. And so let's move ahead. When you made the leap to have an unassisted birth or a birth at home. So your first was a C-section, your second was a VBAC.
A VBAC in the hospital. My third was a home birth, and I had a doctor and my midwife there.
Okay.
And my fourth was a doctor, just a doctor.
At home?
So, at home.
At home.
And yeah, the rest were at home. And my fifth was unassisted and premature. And I still didn't go to the hospital. And that was the best birth of all. And that was the one where I thought, this is how it's supposed to be. I was so relaxed because there was nobody there but me and my husband. And I might tell you, he just came home from work. He was freaking out. He was really scared. He was looking out the window. Why isn't the doctor here yet? It was a middle of a storm on a February morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. And he was freaking out. Well, unbeknownst to him, I had been up most of the night in labor. And I was just walking around the kitchen and mopping the floor and just breathing through my contractions. And I didn't want to wake him up because he didn't get home until late. And I lost my train of thought because he's standing there smiling at me.
All right. So let's get, we got a couple of things to talk about. The premature would be very interesting to talk about. Backup plans. Were you even thinking you could possibly rupture with your unassisted birth, no attendance? Was the C-section so long ago, and do you feel that maybe your body proved itself that it gave birth safely all those other couple of times? Were you thinking of rupture during
not in the subsequent births?
Okay.
I felt that my uterus proved itself with a 10-pound baby after an 8-pound baby.
Okay.
So I trusted that my uterus was perfectly fine and there was nothing wrong with it. However, I will say that even with my last baby, I had 6 births. And even with the last one, I thought, well, what if my luck does run out, just like everybody says? Or are you ever lucky that nothing went wrong? Well, and then when I went in labor, I just felt like, it's just labor. It's just normal. It's just what women do. And there was no fear once labor began, but there was during my pregnancy. Yeah. I was nervous every time.
Yeah.
I think that just
different things to be concerned about. There's always different things that you have on your mind. Okay. So what did you do to prepare physically for a VBAC? Did you walk more, better nutrition, educate yourself more, do more meditation or prayer? Did you increase any kind of personal preparation before you made these decisions for the home births?
I greatly improved my nutrition. I thought, I'm going to heal right after my first one. I am going to heal well. I am going to have a healthy pregnancy. I want my tissues to be strong and elastic. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my diet is probably far different now than it was then, but I did the best with what I had and really concentrated on good nutrition. Made sure I got good sleep, good exercise, those kind of things. I'm not very athletic, not like you, Lynn, but I made sure I got out and walked and got good exercise because I had a toddler too.
Yeah.
By that time, and you get out and you keep busy with a toddler.
Okay, so let's talk about the prematurity. How many weeks along do you think you were when that baby was born?
I was 36 and a half weeks.
Okay.
And actually with that, part of the reason I didn't wake my husband up was because I didn't want to scare him. But I woke up thinking, oh my goodness, I'm in labor and I'm not due for a month.
Okay.
Maybe this time I should go to the hospital. And what I did, I prayed about it. And I got such a sense of peace. Like I heard God saying, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Well, when I finally woke my husband up, I said, you got to get up now. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Our baby's going to be born today. Well, he's freaking out. And I said, like, it's okay. I've been talking to God. It's going to be fine. He was freaking out. He was waiting. He right away called the doctor. And I said, okay, you got to call the doctor. You got to go downstairs. We need stuff for the baby because we didn't have much ready yet. So I said, get this box of clothes and get this box that's got some receiving blankets. And I was ordering him around, that kind of thing. And the doctor was on his way. He just said, what's different, me ordering him around?
Nothing's changed after 40 years, right?
Changed in all these years. So with him freaking out, the doctor didn't make it because the doctor thought he would have time to go to his office and pick up supplies. So my husband delivered that baby, just the two of us. And it was wonderful because I was so relaxed. I knew my body could give birth.
Yeah.
And there's also this thing that it doesn't matter if it's my doctor or my best friend or my own mother. I don't feel quite comfortable with anybody there but my husband. And my husband was just him and me alone. And I read something in Marilyn Moran's book, which was Birth and the Dialogue of Love, about kissing.
Yeah.
So I grabbed his ears and said he had to kiss me. He gives me a little peck. No. That's when I grabbed his ears and ordered him to kiss me. And then he said, you're pushing. I said, no, I'm not. And then I leaned up against the bed and I slid down and he said, there's the baby's head. And he caught the baby and he's saying, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? The whole time he's saying that, he's doing what he needs to do. He caught the baby. He put the baby on my chest. He reached over and got a blanket or a receiving blanket to put on the baby. Yeah. So while he was freaking out, he was doing what had to be done. I immediately started to laugh. The baby immediately peed on me and started crying. And the other children could hear this commotion and they thought that he was tickling me and they want to see what is going on at 5 o'clock in the morning. Then I can hear them knocking on doors. Wake up, mom's had the baby. And it was like Christmas. Yeah. Come see. And it wasn't at the time. I was laughing. He was freaking out about calling the doctor and the doctor's not there yet. But when we look back in it, I thought that's one of the most romantic things we've ever done. It was wonderful.
Tell me, why don't I read a quote that you wrote in your book here? There is something very sensual about giving birth. Nobody had told me about this. It occurred to me the moment I touched the hot, sticky, wet flesh when he was born. This was somehow very sexy. I hadn't figured it out yet, but I know something happened, and I got a glimpse of a deep, hidden secret at that moment. So I don't know if that was that birth you were talking about, but about prematurity, because some people might be concerned about that. 36 and a half weeks. Did the baby, peeing is normal. Was it a boy?
It was a boy, and he immediately cried.
And did he look like a normal weight, 6 or more pounds, or?
He was 5.5 pounds. Okay. And he looked like a toad.
Okay. Todd the Toad, Ode to the Toad.
Ode to the Toad is the name of the poem I wrote about his birth.
Yeah. And so you didn't worry about it. He just happened to be smaller. Did he seem to breathe okay?
Oh yeah, he was breathing fine. And the doctor checked him all out. And he said, that's one thing. If there's any problems at all with the breathing, then you get to the hospital right away. But no, he was fine. He was just really small.
All right. And did you take him into the doctor, say 3 days later, a couple days later, or what did you do? a week or two after he was born?
I think the doctor came back to see me the next day or a couple days later.
Okay.
You remember?
He showed up just after he was born, and then he came back a day later.
Oh, it was the next day. Yeah. So the doctor wasn't there. The doctor showed up just after he was born. And I was walking around with the baby in my arms, and I had cut the cord myself. And the cord was dangling between my knees. And I was walking around holding the baby. And the doctor put his hands on his hips and said, "Don't they let you rest in this house?"
Oh, that's funny. Well, we need to talk about where were you at this time in the 1990s in the United States. I don't think there are any doctors that do house calls for home births. Was this in the Ottawa, the Canada area? Did you have good friends? It depends.
London, Ontario.
Yeah, Ontario. Okay.
Yeah. So I lived near London, and the doctor lived near London, Ontario too. And actually, my first VBAC, I switched doctors to a more trusting doctor, and there was one I'd heard through the grapevine. He was trained in the Netherlands, and he said VBAC is normal, home birth is normal in the Netherlands. So I had this Dutch doctor for the next 2 births, and then he retired and moved out of the country, and then I found another Dutch doctor, and both of them were in London, and both of them did home births, and both of them ended up telling me, "You are built for birthing babies. I don't know why you ever had a C-section."
Yeah, I think
but they were both.
Most women are built for having babies, and so unless you had a thought to finish, go ahead. If you had any.
No, it's gone. My thoughts are gone.
I think we should talk about healing from a C-section. Were you ever a member of ICAN, the International Cesarean Awareness Network? Do you have any advice or suggestions to give to women? What I want to say is, in our country, I believe 30 to 33% babies are born via C-section. And I believe it's commonly understood and agreed upon that really only 5% of those babies need to be born C-section. However, every friend, relative, almost every person you talk to will say, "Well, I needed that C-section. I needed that C-section." Part of this, I believe, is a coping mechanism, because it's very difficult to realize if you were on the chopping block as being in the category that didn't really need it. You were robbed of a womanly, feminine experience of a vaginal birth, and it's very hard to heal. And so maybe what are some resources, or what are some heartfelt advice you might give to women who had the C-section and maybe it was unnecessary and they have to work through that? How was that process?
Well, ICAN was a wonderful support for that. Excuse me. It's cold in here and my nose is dripping. ICAN is a wonderful support for the emotional recovery. And that's something I think a lot of people don't understand. When I had my C-section, I kind of had to put the trauma up on the shelf because I couldn't deal with it at the time. You just cope with the pain of recovering from a C-section and not with the emotional pain of being, like you said, feeling like I was robbed out of something that I wanted to experience. Nancy Wayner Cohen's book, The Silent Knife, was also a great help. In fact, I cried all the way through that, reading other VBAC stories and cesarean section stories. And that's perfectly normal. And I do mention it in my book too, about the grief that you suffer from that. Mm-hmm. So, but most people think, well, just get over it, take some aspirin and get over it. And you should be lucky is another one you hear. You should be thankful that you're so lucky because you could have died back in the past. Well, you mentioned the 5%. The medical experts always said it's about 5% of the time that something goes wrong. And there was a midwife that kept a diary in the 1700s, and she said about 5% of the times, they've got all the statistics written there, and about 5% of the times women experienced trouble. They didn't die, they had trouble about 5% of the time. So why are we doing 1 in 3 women now is having a C-section? What are we doing wrong that 1 in 3 women is having so much trouble? And I think I went off on the rabbit trail instead of answering your question.
No, I'll give my opinion, and I'm an opinionated person. My opinion, why we have 1 in 3, is the woman herself is consenting to it. She's consenting to what the doctor is telling her because she's paying him as an expert to look for that expertise. So part of her thinks she should have it. Part of her feels not necessarily bullied into it. You go into the delivery room, there's a crisis mentality if you're not progressing. If the moment you consent to an induction, I hope that you physically absolutely need to be induced. When you're induced, that baby is not even giving you a signal it's ready to be born. So you had better have major medical problems for a need for an induction. But again, I'm not a doctor with experience. I believe that too many women are consenting to the C-section. Many women will try for the VBAC, but they don't go all the way. They hold themselves back with a little nervousness, a little feeling that maybe they can't do it, that their body's going to fail on them. But our C-section rate is very high because women are consenting to it. And that's something that can be changed based on the patient. So it's very interesting that these stats could turn around based on the women. And it's just, hopefully shows like this and discussions like this will help women to think that they have options, that they can seek, even if they've had, I know a woman locally here, she had 4 C-sections and then she had a home birth and, paramedics showed up and rushed her and the baby off to the hospital, and that caused trauma and stress. But her body was perfectly fine. And, so part of the high rate is women agreeing to it. No one is holding a gun to your head telling you have to have this done. And sometimes people they think they feel more comfortable with the C-section, but you tell me the healing after C-section for the body, emotionally, physically, takes longer. And the bonding with the baby is apt to be much better after a vaginal birth. Hopefully the baby can be put right up on you. You can nurse, feel, touch right away. Whereas a C-section, even a couple of my hospital births, took the vaginal delivery, took the baby away to weigh and measure, and then brought back to me 45 minutes later. So anyways, there's immediate bonding, and there's easier recovery after almost every vaginal birth. So,
well, babies aren't meant to be taken from us. They're meant to be with their mother. Yeah. And it's all part of a perfect design where the smell and the feel of the baby helps her uterus to shrink back to normal size. So right. Every time they don't allow that to happen, they're causing problems. That's why we see more hemorrhage in the hospital, because we're interrupting that natural cycle that's supposed to complete itself.
Yeah. And I want to thank people for writing in comments. Rebecca writes that she and her husband chose a home birth after a C-section for the first baby because she had a traumatic experience at the hospital. And she went on to have VBACs and home births, and she's the mother of many children, and she won't look back. And this is the encouragement I want to give to women, is that you can have a C-section. And for those of us who have large families, each progressive birth, we gain more confidence and we learn a little more to the point where we're not going back. We don't want to, you wouldn't want to choose a C-section ever again and avoid it. And I'm sure that you've encouraged your daughters-in-laws to avoid C-sections. The body, for the most part, won't need to have a C-section. And our hearts and prayers go out to those women who are recovering from C-sections and mulling this over. You can get over it. You can rejoice in the beautiful family that you have. You might not have had the birth that you wanted, but your baby's alive and well and healthy, and it's a miracle.
And there's nothing wrong with feeling bad about the C-section. That's where it's almost like you're treated like you don't like the baby because you don't like how it got there. That's two different things.
Yeah.
You can love your baby more than life itself and really hate the way he was born, he or she.
That's okay too. Well, I want to bring up something too that you did in your community. You had the Birth Nerds overnight, monthly, or quarterly meetings or get-togethers. Tell us about that. It may be a great idea for after we get out of this coronavirus crisis, when we can all socialize again. Give us the idea or the wonderful weekends or meetings that you had.
This was an idea I had after going to conferences. I just love the birth conferences and learn so much, but there's never enough time just to chat and stay up late and talk, because conferences are very busy times. So I had a big house in Ontario, 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms. Mm-hmm. And what we did was sent the men away for the weekend. They were gone fishing. And I had birth nerds gathering at my place. And it was just a 24 hours. I wanted it to be like a pajama party where we would talk about birth, and then we could stay up as late as we wanted and drink wine if you want to, or whatever. We had a lot of beds in my house, and camp cots and inflatable beds. So I had there was 15 to 20 women, and we had a potluck supper. We started around 4:00, and it was 24 hours, and we had a potluck supper together, and then we had teaching. And my friend Billy Harrigan is a wonderful teacher of all things birth related, and she taught a session, and I taught a session, and we had different topics of interest to birth nerds. We had doulas, childbirth educators, we had midwives there, mm-hmm. and some people stayed up till 3:00 in the morning, and some of us went to bed earlier, and we got up and had breakfast together and lunch together, and we had teaching sessions in between. But we talked, and women make connections at these places, and they learn so much just from these connections. Because I found at conferences, quite often I learned just as much standing in line at the cafeteria as I learned in the session itself. You would hear people talking and sharing their little stories. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to happen. And I did that. Actually, I did it spring and fall for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And then we moved here to the US. And it won't happen anymore because my big house is now divided into apartments until we return back to Canada.
Okay. But
it was a wonderful way for women just to relax and let down their hair and have that chance to talk and share meals.
So now, some of these women, were they mothers of older kids? Were they pregnant women? And did they have a newborn nursing baby that they brought with them? Or did you find it was a whole mix?
It was a mixture of old people like me and young moms expecting their second or their first. And like I said, there was doulas. Another thing I did was there was a midwife from the UK. Mm-hmm. I can't think of her name right now. Shauna Walker. Okay. And she was traveling across the US, and she was going to, I think, Philadelphia, but she went to Montreal, can't remember, Asheville. And somebody had said, gee, I wonder what it would take to get her here. So all these major cities she went to, and she came to my place in my little town of Tillsonburg, Ontario.
Nice.
And I had people, midwives from across the country, that came to my place in Ontario, like from the West Coast, from the US, from Northern Ontario. They came to my place for this one-day workshop. Thought, it's too bad no doctors came. They were all invited.
Yeah.
But there was about 25 people, and that's all I could fit in my living room. Yeah. And I had about at least another 10 people begging, please, 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 just one more.
Yeah.
And I just stood at the door and said, I know, yes, it's just my house here. It's not a fancy building anywhere or a hotel or anything. It's just come on into my living room. And that too and there was some underground midwives that came to that too. And she was teaching breech, which is not being taught anymore. Yeah. Now, Dr. Dr. Stuart Fishbein is reteaching breech, and he's trying to get this so there's fewer C-sections. And Dr. Fishbein does home births, and he does twins, and he does VBACs, and he does breech births at home.
Nice. And I just want to say what a wonderful gift that you gave to all of these people. We need to have the personal connections. It's one thing to do a little research on the internet, watch YouTube videos, take classes, but to really get in person. And when I had my first unassisted birth in Charleston, South Carolina, there were between 10 and 15 couples that had unassisted births in the 1990s. And it was just so empowering to meet these other women and to just become friends with them, and the power of personal connection. And what a great gift for the husbands to watch the younger kids while their wife could come, spend a whole night and stay overnight at your place. And so we are coming up on 45 minutes. We got a few more minutes. I wanted to keep this to about 45 minutes. And yes, some people are asking, can you save this off of Facebook and put it on YouTube? Well, my husband and I were trying to do that the other night, and we're finding that the sound is not matching up with the video. So we're gonna try to figure it out, because on Facebook, you have your timeline and it'll get lost underneath. So I'm going to try to see what I can do to save these recordings and put them on my YouTube channel, Marriage Coach Lynn. And so we're hoping to do that. There is a save option and share. But for the meantime, it will be up on my timeline. And what else do we need to say about C-sections? I think we covered the basics. The point I wanted to cover was for you to share your story, to offer encouragement, talk a little bit about healing, inspire people not to be afraid, and to really be courageous. I think you're very courageous, Sheila, to just the life you're living. And you
think that just as much chicken.
What?
I'm as much chicken as everybody else.
You just know a meaningful life is a life in which you explore what it is you think you should be doing. What is the will of God in my life? What is the woman's body capable of or intended to do? And I think when we explore that, it takes us into motherhood that much more strong. If we look at making important decisions, and we don't have time to get into this, but so many people, like I said, have the closest women in their lives, or their neighbors, their boss, their coworkers, their mother might be opposed to what they're doing. And so while we're gathering courage, to maybe have a VBAC, you might have people with opinions. But we don't really have time to get into that. But just the idea of being courageous and making your decisions to the best of your ability. So any parting words from Sheila Stubbs, author of Birthing?
Yes, I was just going to ask you if you could hold that up. Thank you. It is available on Amazon, but the secret is get it from me personally, because I have to charge a lot of extra to sell it on Amazon with all their fees. So contact me at Birthing the Easy Way at Hotmail. Good old Hotmail address.
Okay.
And I've got a page on Facebook, a Birthing the Easy Way page on Facebook, and you can contact me through there or through Messenger or anything, and I can get you a better deal than I can give on Amazon.
Good. All right. That's great to hear. All right. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Sheila. It's been wonderful.
Me too.
And I'm hoping you have a great day.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.